Today, the everyman or layman civilian might ask the question, but why would our own government lie to us? Why would our leaders and politicians deceptively mislead us? To ask such questions is to be severely naive and oblivious to the events of history. Such questions would describe the average person asking them as clueless to the makeup of the human fallen nature, the historical decline of civilizations and barbarism of man's will over nations, the corruption of power over man's heart, and the subjective desires and preoccupations of the individual, or the rabid and irrational nature of the crowd, the bloodlust of the mob that often moves from a false moral authority. Governing others as governing oneself is always a battle, and the rules to war are artificial. Yet everyday people still cannot gather this understanding. Well, the majority of people today do not actually see the world for what it really is. In fact, they struggle in many, if not most cases, to see themselves for who they truly are. There we can ask a simple question. If people do not know themselves, how could they know or even begin to understand the complexities of a society? If the vast majority of that society is emotionally immature, distracted, and preoccupied with things, ignorant, narcissistic, searching for identity, would not it be best, say if you wanted to mislead that society, to aim your weapon at the identity? It's a apparent Achilles heel? What do you think identity politics is all about? Equality? Inclusivity? That's what the establishing powers would want you to believe. This gives you a false understanding of who you are, of what society should be, and what purpose you have within it. It gives you a religious mission, a broad path to follow, a crowd to join, a tribe of membership, personal meaning, or a source of self-worth, a role to play on the world stage. We'll come back to this idea of the role later. Where am I going with this? The point is to explain the purpose of governmental manipulation and deception. It has to do with influencing a crowd or population. It is easiest to accomplish crowd control by creating a common goal, accomplished via dialectics, of course, creating conflict that results in a fusion or synthesis that embodies a goal that becomes common. A common goal with a joined moral sentiment, a cosmic mission of ultimate good. This humanitarian and altruistic mission appeals to the emotions of mankind. The fallen man, subconsciously knowing he is bad or wrong, desires to be perceived as good, as right, and will in many cases choose the perception of appearing good than the reality of being good. Virtue signaling is the prime example of this idea. Many cheating spouses, abusers, gossipers, spiteful and vengeful simpletons, liars, and typical types of low integrity in their general lives will join movements and political ventures to appear good in exchange for authentically living it out. This speaks to a true pandemic in our current society, not one of biological proportions, but of virtuous ones. One of inauthenticity, a crisis of meaning, and a pathology of attention-seeking behaviors. I would argue this is a result of many things, but moreover a response to living virtually, denying God, and connecting with ourselves and others through the predominance of screens. Stuck in the media abyss, fractured in our vision for seeing the world, ourselves and each other for what and who we truly are, only seeing through the lens of a kaleidoscope. This is your brain on 21st century technological drugs. And this is the population asking the same dumb questions about why our government would lie, or why would media and medical industries literally fabricate lies to fulfill ulterior agendas. I guess what is most important here is not answering why such things are possible, but how one could come to the conclusion that it is rational to think otherwise. At this juncture, it is blatantly irrational to believe you can trust any governing body to have the best interests of its people in mind, to follow a consistent and righteous path unwilling to part from its responsibilities owed to its population. This is the perspective of a fool or a coward. Some might argue that the average citizen today is both. So if the source of one's thinking and overall understanding of themselves and the world is an obvious reason why most people today are blind to the agendas being rolled out on the Western world, what is the actual agenda? Well, the Great Reset, of course. Similar to how global warming morphed into the more appealing and euphemistic term climate change, New World Order is now the Great Reset. Same product, different package. I have provided some articles for you to read yourself for those coincidence theorists out there who love to hurl the Alex Jones straw man arguments. Believe it or not, the new normal is not about adjusting to some unfortunate and evasive pandemic virus. In fact, the new abnormal is about redefining the world, redefining humanity, all beneath the guise of a global pandemic intervention effort. Enter the Great Reset. Think Skynet, the God computer or world brain, and as Boulding would have put it, world as a total system. Nature, man, and society interconnected biotechnologically within a closed algorithmic nanosystem, whereby mankind does not merely traverse the internet but becomes the Internet of Things, the futurist's wet dream. The philosophy of Francis Bacon and Julian Huxley, the cybernetics of Weiner, machine learning of MIT, nanotechnology of DARPA, the insanity of Kurzweil, and the imagination of Gibson's neuromancer. The Great Reset encapsulates man as his own god, and technology as his tool to perfect nature as well as himself. Prometheism reified, the new reconstruction, and fourth industrial revolution of the 21st century. Let us refer to Julian Huxley to get an understanding of this transhumanist philosophy. Up till now, human life has generally been, as Hobbes described it, nasty, brutish, and short. The great majority of human beings, if they have not already died young, have been afflicted with misery. We can justifiably hold the belief that these lands of possibility exist, and that the present limitations and miserable frustrations of our existence can be in large measure surmounted. The human species can, if it wishes, transcend itself, not just sporadically, an individual here in one way, an individual there in another way, but in its entirety as humanity. If biotechnology is required to connect the human population to the Internet of Things and global digital grid system, then biological autonomy is anathema to such goals. Meaning, for the system to be complete, its governing body must have access to your biological system, DNA, etc. What better way to achieve such goals than to implement a population-wide vaccination program that gives open access to not merely the biological data of every individual, but universal biological contact and control? Would you trust a stranger with the keys to your home? I think not. Let's continue. There's much more at stake here than your comforts and customs. There will be no returning to normalcy. There in fact will be no return at all, but a redefining of terms, of existence, a reconstruction of reality and life as you know it. It opens with cultural renewal, getting you to change your customs and expectations, the conditioning of compliance orders, rules, limitations on mobility, function, enforced mask wearing, strict spatial parameters, self-policing, citizen vigilante behavior, interpersonal disorder and disaffection, a type of systemic socio-cultural destabilization. In other words, controlling the crowd indirectly by creating conflict and confusion within it. Though this is only the beginning, a long, enduring, and drawn-out system of change is simply at its primary stage, and it begins with the resetting of everything, yet not in the fashion that most people think. And tragedy mixed with trauma, and of course drama, is a requirement to produce the appearance of an organic situation. Moreover, this promotes the plausibility of urgency, what Virilio would call velocity, the speeding up of the technological process, unbeknownst to the population it aims to reform. This idea of velocity describes how technology as system creates a system of speed, whirling society into a trance-like state, in which change occurs quickly, and the population is too preoccupied to detect such drastic changes. We are experiencing such velocity today, and COVID-19 is the catalyst and agent of speed, creating the need for urgency. What we have here included is a requirement to change society's idea or vision of the world, and change that vision such that it aligns with the vision that the technocrats have in mind. This is done via drama and trauma, manipulating identity and forming an ideology. Let us sample the prescient words of futurist Kenneth Boulding from his work, The Meaning of the 20th Century. What is it then that gives to an image of the world power over man's mind, and that leads him to build his personal identity around it? The answer seems to be that an image of the world becomes an ideology if it creates in the mind of the person holding it a role for himself which he values highly. New ideologies are therefore likely to arise if people feel that the roles which they occupy in the existing society are unsatisfactory to them or despised by others. To create a role, however, an ideology must create a drama. The first essential characteristic of an ideology is then an interpretation of history sufficiently dramatic and convincing so that the individual feels that he can identify with it, and which in turn can give the individual a role in the drama it portrays. Boulding directly addresses the utopian naivete of modern progressive ideology that is flooding streets and university classrooms today. An ideology that is being directly promoted by media, governments, institutions, and industries for the specific sake of cultural renewal in preparation for the global reset. The World Economic Forum uses three very significant R's to describe its mission: reflect, reimagine, and finally, reset. In light of Boulding, Virilio, and many other thinkers who have described the coming of this technocratic regime, I will break down what these words essentially imply. Let's begin with reflect, and considering Boulding's point of ideology, reflecting a critical interpretation of history, to use the critical theory's terminology, a problematic history. What they mean by reflect is to problematize our history and reflect on its white supremacist imperialism, oppression, and racism, hence fomenting an ideological view that screams for reform by any means necessary. Next is reimagine. Lennon's song Imagine comes to mind. Interestingly, this was one of the first celebrity-driven propaganda pieces that came out post-C virus outbreak in March. A strategic way to cull the masses and soothe our hearts and minds with soft and sweet utopian nothings. But this term, reimagine, implies a picture that is far more extreme than the common person is prepared for. They are implying the reimagining or new image of man, of nature, citizen, and society. Nature, civilization, and mankind remade or perfected in their image, the pure technocratic utopian vision. Then there is reset. Let us think about what the term reset actually implies. Let's gamify the term. Think about when you're playing a video game. You're at the final boss level, just about ready to beat the game, when someone pushes the reset button. What happens? You lose all data, all progress, and have to start from square one. Now apply that idea to civilization in 2020, though in this game, you have to change games altogether and restart playing a different role, a different character, with a different purpose. Are you prepared and willing to accept such a drastic and traumatic experience, all under the guise of a Phantom Menace case of the sniffles? I think not. Reset implies erasing the past, erasing you, and forming a new one, in their image, by their set of standards. A new abnormal. The denouncing of the Constitution, the nation-state, and sovereignty, natural law, human rights, and the Christian ethic and order of the Most High God. The illusion of social democracy covering a neoliberal techno-capitalism within a plutocracy, with eco-fascism as the iron fist that keeps the proles in line, whereby the human is no longer liberated of free will and made in the image of God, but a peculiarity, a machination of the state, a subtech organism, an Internet of Things contingency and piece of property. The global reset aims to construct the final Babylonian Earth state. Nation, country, culture, and civilization become wholeheartedly business and technology as the alchemic marriage under Satan. The Nimrodian Babylonian enterprise of the 21st century. Postmodernism meets post-civilization.